Legend of War here, and today we'll be going over the Shadows of Change Content Editions Part 2 for Zinch. So there's some text over here that we don't really need to focus too much on here. I really just want to focus on the units, give you guys my opinion, and I'd love to hear your opinions. Basically, the patch was originally due this week, and they've encountered some issues. It's moving on to at least next week, could be later. Then they're focusing on melee characters, 2 more units, and they're still talking about the Zangors not having beaks, which I can't believe that conversation's still going on, but whatever. If some people care about that, that's fair enough. Okay, so first thing we want to talk about, though, is the Chaos Lord of Zinch. So the Chaos Lord of Zinch is built for combat. Carrying his trusty halberd, it makes him adept at fighting monsters and larger creatures. He can certainly go toe-to-toe with some of the biggest foes the Warhammer world has to offer. He's also great at holding his ground through the use of his expert charge defense and charge reflection passive abilities. So I often find that these descriptions here are not very good at really explaining what the skills of this character is going to be. So for example, expert charge defense and charge reflections on single entity characters are not particularly high value. It's not like these do nothing, it's just that they do very little compared to just generally having high stats. Like, this isn't going to save him from Archaon, as an example. So I find that expert charge defense and charge reflection are much better additions to a unit of infantry because they're the ones that are going to have a wider area of effect and are able to really repel a lot of the charge, whereas otherwise they could be severely hurt by it. Typically speaking, single entities will oftentimes find themselves get knocked down if they're not on a mount, and thereby not even take damage from a charge, or just not really take that much damage in the first place and just start fighting back immediately. So these descriptions here are not very good. What we really need to see is his stats and his skills. That's what I'm mostly curious about. And I don't think this overview here really gives us much indication of what his actual skills are, if anything. So, marked by Zinch, a master of the mind, the Chaos Lord of Zinch benefits from the Mark of Zinch, which grants him magical attacks and barrier by default. Yep, that's common across every single Zinch unit. Then we've got the True Power, armed with a heavy suit of Chaos Armor, so basically saying he has a high armor value, probably around 120, maybe more. A Towering Shield, so he's got a shield value, probably a bronze shield. Maybe silver, who knows. And a Magical Halberd, so magical attacks anti-large. The Chaos Lord of Zinch is a defensive juggernaut, so high melee defense, who excels at fighting large targets, especially when mounted on a Disc of Zinch. So the Disc of Zinch is a mount that is not unique to him. The Chaos Sorcerer Lord and Hero also has access to the Disc of Zinch, but it says here, especially when mounting on a Disc of Zinch. So I'm curious to see if his anti-large capabilities actually increase on the Disc of Zinch. I don't actually think it is the case. I think this is just whoever's writing this is just basically writing. That's all it is. We would actually need to see whether or not it's reflected in the actual gameplay. But there's nothing new here from what we haven't seen before. So, Disciple of Zinch. As a powerful tyrant and fearsome leader, the Chaos Lord of Zinch inspires his followers and emboldens their resolve by using the Change or Die ability, which is a Zinchian twist on Stand or Die. He can improve the leadership and damage resistance of nearby friendly units. He also makes use of the Paragon of Change ability, which recharges the barrier of nearby allies. So this is definitely good. Not unique to him, though. The Sorcerer Lords have access to that and heroes. And then we've got this one here. So this is kind of new, because throughout pretty much there's a couple of exceptions. In the red line at the very end of it, there is like a stand or die or attack or die, something like that. It provides a bit of leadership and 24 attack or 24 melee defense. So it'd be interesting if this provides 24% ward save. That could be very good, but we'll have to have a look at it. And I think the other exception is like the Tomb Kings, which provide no melee defense or anything, but it provides regeneration, which is actually very handy for them. Actually one of the best ones. So that's with the Resurrection upgraded. So in terms of what we've seen here for the Chaos Lord, here are my major concerns, is that this dude is going to have a really sort of basic skill line. It's basically just going to be a melee line, the exact same thing that we've seen with other characters. He's going to have a red line and a blue line, and he might have a couple of skills like Paragon of Change, but I'm worried that he's not going to have like specific units that excel under his command, and that when he hits rank 15 or when playing as the Warriors of Chaos, sacrifice a certain amount of souls, he just becomes a spellcaster, demon prince, with a trait that basically reflected that he used to be a melee character, but now he's a wizard. So, because that's the case with the characters that you start off with as lords, and when you're playing as warriors of chaos, and then eventually if they become like an undivided demon prince, they then become a fire wizard, but there's a trait that says, hey, he used to be good in melee, and it gives him like 12 melee attacks. So that could be the case with this one. Not entirely sure. It's good to see that this character is going to be available for Zinch and Warriors of Chaos, but again, I'm a little bit worried that he's going to feel a little bit bland. Just basically be, hey, look, here's a character, he has melee capabilities, and there's not much else that is interesting about him. I hope that that's not the case, because if we take some examples from other races, which I hope Creative Assembly learned that these examples already exist and they kind of need to keep building on this. The High Elves are a really good example of where the different Lord types really benefit from having different armies. So for example, you've got princes, which are melee characters. You've got princesses, which are archer characters. And then you've got the arch wizards, which are spellcasters, right? And each of them will benefit from different army compositions, but they've also got different skills. Like the spellcasters are greatly going to be different in how they're used and the armies that they comprise of, based on their traits as well, than the princes. And the princes are going to be different from the princesses as well in terms of what their capabilities are. So I hope they sort of take that into consideration. It would be good to see if the Chaos Lord of Zinch has access to traits that are not available to any other character. They're only available to him. And hopefully they're not something useless like +4 leadership on a Wednesday while it's raining sort of thing. So hopefully they put some interesting stuff in there. Then we've got the Exalted hero of Zinch, which I'm just going to skip over this part here and just go to the actual gameplay overview. The Exalted hero is a melee specialist using his magical attacks and high weapon strength to get into the thick of the action. He is armed with a mighty halberd to be keeping with the rest of our Zinch roster, rather than dual swords that this character takes inspiration from in its miniature form. So if people were having issues with Zangors not having beaks, are they going to have issue with this guy here not being like the mini? Because I think Zinch has kind of got a lot of halberds now. And if the Lord and the hero are basically using the same loadout, although this guy doesn't have a shield, he does have 3 heads though. Are people going to complain about that? Like, I don't personally care that much. I'm just curious. So he has a solid melee defense that will sustain him long into the fight. Just like his Lord counterpart, he is adept at taking a charge with expert charge defense and charge reflection passive abilities. Cool. Once again, I don't think these are particularly important. Then we've got marked with Zinch. We've already seen that. Notice how this is not in bold, but it's bold over here. Come on, man. Get your formatting correctly. Anyway, so magic attacks and barrier. Anti-large specialist. The Exalted hero of Zinch carries magical halberd, which allows him to reliably duel monstrous infantry. Basically, this is just saying, hey, he's got anti-large. Cool. Which we can see very easily from his unit card when we actually see... Well, not his unit card, his like stat card. Opportunist. Always scheming and seeking a path to greater glory. The Exalted hero of Zinch takes command if the Lord is slain, bolstering the leadership of the army if he assumes command. So this is not unique to him, but it is unique to Zinch. He's the only one in Zinch that's able to do this. So this is something they first introduced with the chieftain, with the Skaven. So I imagine with this is actually something that should play more into the AI's favor than the player, because typically speaking, the player is not going to get their Lord killed super early, but the AI might. So this is probably not something you really want to make use of because it requires you to get your Lord slain. It's not like getting your Lord killed suddenly makes this better. It'll never be the case. It'll be the case of this here will just soften the blow of the leadership penalty that you suffer from your Lord dying. Now, if you're someone that plays this game and you're constantly getting your character, your commander killed, then that actually might be quite useful for you. But for me personally, I'm probably never going to make use of it. And I'm sure that's the case with many of you guys as well. So Mounts, Chaos Steed, Chaos Chariot, and Disc of Zinch. Again, these guys here, the Lord and the Hero, are very similar in terms of their utility. And I'm worried that their skill line is also going to be pretty basic. I hope that this guy isn't just melee line and then blue line, and then that's it. I really hope that's not the case, because that'll make him quite boring. However, for the Warriors of Chaos specifically, and I do like that they're adding this stuff to other races as well, this means that for the heroes, So when you recruit an Exalted hero, currently you can only dedicate them to Khorne or Nurgle. So now apparently you'll be able to dedicate them to Khorne, Nurgle, and Zinch. So that's really good because the sorcerer dedications can only go to Zinch or Slaanesh. So it'll be good when they get around to the Thrones of Decay, if the Warriors of Chaos will be able to recruit a character, a sorcerer, that can dedicate to Nurgle, and you can actually have a Nurgle hero have a spellcaster, because currently you can only get that through your lords. So that could be really handy eventually. So this is sort of, over time, we're really going to flesh out the Warriors of Chaos with these different characters, which I find that these characters here, I think, are going to be more useful to the Warriors of Chaos than they will be for Zinch. Because at the end of the day, Zinch, you've still got your spellcaster variant, and they're heavily armored. They're just not great in melee, but they're spellcasters. So they can dish out way more damage that way. It really, it's going to, depends on how you play. But overall, I think this is something that the Zinch roster needed, but I don't know if it's going to have a huge amount of impact, and I really want to see what their skill line is. I hope they don't just have really basic skills that that every other generic character in the game has, which is just a little bit boring, because there's a lot of characters out there that are melee characters that have got some really interesting skills, like, for example, the Chieftain, or the for the Skaven as an example, or the Packmaster, where they've got interesting mounts and also interesting abilities that set them apart from other characters. That's what they really need to be doing with these guys here. Then we've got Centaurs of Zinch. You good boy, get some of that milk. So, as mentioned earlier, our thoughts here were to expand on the connection Chaos has across its many followers. In this case, Zinch. Using the Chaos Mark system, we opted for the Centaurs to provide bestial cavalry to add versatility to what is normally quite a missile and magic heavy focused army. Like with Zangors, these creatures have been developed based on the setting of Warhammer Fantasy Battle, so no beaks. Oh, boycott. Great, now they have to fight 2 battles on beaks, or other things that you might associate with Zinch in Age of Sigmar. In keeping our content true to the source material, just like the Zangors, this unit will be available to both Zinch and Beastman races to play with, and the team and I have plans for how we can improve the offering to further Chaos Marked Beastmen for you in the future. Okay, cool. So gameplay overview with these ones. I imagine these will be fairly light cavalry, which you do already have playing as Zinch. You've got your Marauder cavalry, but those are kind of missile cavalry. But that being said, they're not bad cavalry. So these guys here won't have missiles. Anyway, a fast and hard-hitting unit, the Centaurs of Zinch carry great weapons offering armor-piercing power to take on tougher opponents. Yeah, the problem with Centaurs usually is, even if it's got armor piercing, they usually die really easily because they're unarmored and have low melee stats. So armor piercing is great, but it's useless if they don't have combat to actually have staying power. But we'll just have to wait and see. Because I don't imagine this unit here being like a tier 4 unit. It's probably going to be tier 2 at best, maybe tier 3 at best. Anyway, carrying the Mark of Zinch grants them magical attacks and barrier, which that's the case for every unit in the Zinch roster. So, unholy combination. Combining the Mark of Zinch with the Centaur stat line makes for a fast Vanguard deploying and barrier-attuned bestial cavalry unit that benefits from standard beastman abilities such as Rowdy and Primal Fury. Okay, cool. Great weapons, so basically saying armor-piercing and magical attacks, so good against demons and ethereal units, yep. And then Arcane Charge. This is something that the Zangors have. I guess it makes sense that they have it as well. So the more you cast spells, it'll eventually increase their weapon strength by 20%, which is not huge in on itself, but 20% is better than nothing, and all you have to do is cast some spells beforehand, which playing as Zinch should be very easy for you. So that's not so bad. So that'll be available to Zinch and Beastmen. So that's cool. I'm looking forward to playing Beastmen and trying them out. I don't know if I'm going to try them out with Zinch, because honestly, I think that Zinch has just got better units, but I haven't seen the stat line, I haven't seen them perform. I may be underestimating them, possibly. We'll see. Then we've got Changebringers. So, it says, last but by no means least are the Changebringers, a unit of flamers which fly across the battlefield on discs of Zinch. These horrors will help Zinch quickly reach their enemies in battle and keep the pressure on from above. Yeah, so that's really good. It's not like they don't already have a unit like this, the Burning Chariot of Zinch, but, you know, just get more. But these ones here, instead of it being a single entity character, these are multi-entity. So you've now got 4 types of flamers. You've got the regular flamers of Zinch, a multi-entity one that's essentially good at taking apart infantry units. So it's the lowest tier. Then you've got the Exalted Flamer of Zinch, which is a single entity, which deals massive damage and is usually best against like single entities. And then you've got the Burning Chariot, which is like an Exalted Flamer, except it's flying, and it fires down fire on down blue. Actually, pretty good against single entities as well. So these ones here, I imagine, are just the flying variant of regular flamers, and I imagine they'd just be a tier above those. So definitely not useless, but we're getting a lot of samey units, that's all. A step up from your normal flamers of Zinch, Changebringers have the maneuverability, speed, and agility to be able to fly across the battlefield whilst ignoring the terrain and any penalties they may cause. But if need be, their increased charge bonus will help them with making the first move. Now, typically speaking, you would never send your flamers into melee because they are so bad in a fight. These are type of units that usually can be killed off by bloody yeoman cavalry. So basically, once these units have used up all their ammo, you just take them away, get them out of the way, because it is not worth sending them into melee. So if they've got like charge bonus of 80, but then their melee attack is like 10, something like that, that's totally pointless. That's not going to be very good at all, especially considering how quick these guys usually die, because they usually only have about 3,000 health in total. But got to wait and see how it goes in the actual game. So we've got Shock and Awe. Changebringers are one of the ultimate expressions of the chaotic nature of Zinch. Flamers of Zinch, which are comparatively slow and lumbering units, take to the skies, benefiting greatly from increased maneuverability, which is great, except they've already got that, so it makes it feel like this is kind of a little bit redundant. Apart from, I guess it comes down to this. You've got your flying anti-single entity unit, and then you've got your flying like anti-infantry unit. But you've already got plenty of anti-infantry playing as Zinch, so is this really a needed character, or is this unit, or is this just creating variety for the sake of variety? I really feel like Zinch is not getting any tools here that make them more adaptable to different types of enemies. Anyway, so you got Death from Above. It basically means that they just shoot their stuff down. I don't think that's even worth a single sentence. I do not think that they would be one of the best missile flying units in the game. Actually, there's not that really many of them, are there? But that being said, usually the Flamers have pretty low amounts of ammunition, so it'll be interesting to see if these guys have like anything more than 10 shots. But we'll see. So Flamers of Zinch. Being Flamers of Zinch at their core, the Changebringers benefit from their usual hallmarks of this unit. Armor-piercing, flaming attacks, warp flame are all present. However, due to the newfound mobility, Changebringers don't have quite as much of a barrier when compared to their ground-based kin. Okay, so that could indicate that maybe they have fewer entities than their ground-based kin, which would mean that they've got lower health and thereby lower barrier. Hard to say. But I think one big thing to take into consideration here is if you took a unit of regular Flamers of Zinch and used up all of their ammunition, just get a whole bunch of enemies, stand them in a row, and you just burn them one at a time without them fighting back. And then you did it as well with these Changebringers, who would end up with more damage. It is way more likely that the Flamers of Zinch would vastly outperform them. But this really comes down to they're much harder to kill, but they'll probably also have an increased recruitment cost, maybe even recruit time, and higher upkeep cost. Now, if their upkeep cost is if it's too high, it might be possible this unit here actually can't deliver that much value on the battlefield because it needs to be able to defeat equal units or above in order to be a balance of power pusher. So that's what I'm really curious about. If it doesn't have enough ammunition, it won't be able to do that. So this will be available for Zinch and Demons of Chaos, which is cool. I don't think Demons of Chaos, playing as Daniel is particularly popular at the moment, but he keeps getting new units, so that's interesting. So overall, I think that there's nothing bad here. Like, getting new stuff, there's nothing bad about this. But I worry that this isn't really going to change things up much for Zinch, which is kind of key to what they need. They need a bit of a mix-up with their roster. Everything feels same in terms of utility than what they've already got. Except for the Lord stuff, the Lord and Hero being a melee character. I think that'll change things a bit. Really need to see their skill lines to make any definite judgment on them. I think with looking at this is that I wasn't necessarily expecting more. It's just that this hasn't blown me away. It's like, cool, this is okay stuff. I don't even know if I'm going to use most of it when I play as Zinch or Warriors of Chaos. But it's cool, I guess. It just doesn't blow me out of the water. Well, not super impressed by any of it, without having seen it on the campaign map or on the battlefield. But let me know your thoughts about all of this stuff here. I really do feel like most people were expecting Cathay and Kislev to get the meatiest additions. And honestly, the stuff that we saw with Cathay last week was better than this stuff here. And I'm expecting a lot more with the Kislev stuff as well, especially considering there's a Stankius campaign just doesn't feel right at the moment. So it'd be curious to see how they address that. Anyway, that's the end of this one here, guys. Let me know in the comments below what you think of this blog. Overall, I wasn't really impressed with it, but I also wasn't like angry about it. I mean, everything additional is good. I just don't know how much utility this is actually going to bring to Zinch. Anyway, it's the end of this one. Appreciate you guys, and I'll see you next time. Later, guys.